Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming to University of Miami Institute for Data Science and Computing, our Meet a Data Scientist. This is our 5th installment. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kenneth Goodman, Director of the Institute for Bioethics and Health Policy, and also Director of our Data Ethics and Society branch here at the Institute. So I'm going to kick it over to Ken and to introduce our speaker today.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good afternoon to everybody. This is our 5th in a series of Meet the Data Scientists. What we're discovering is that when you have a good idea and you actually follow through, well, if you build it, they will come. And what we're really enjoying is really a high level of sustained interest in this series. People are learning about data science, they're learning about the scope of it, they're learning about its utility, they're learning about its role at the University of Miami. And so it's a real pleasure and a privilege today to be able to introduce our 5th speaker in the series, Dr. Yelena Yesha. She is, as you can see from her first slide, visiting distinguished professor in the Department of Computer Science, but she's also at IDISK, the Chief Innovation Officer and Head of International Collaborations. She works with faculty to engage government and industry to collaborate with the University of Miami and works with faculty on projects related to innovation. She's also professor at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and director of the National Science Foundation Center for Accelerated Real-Time Analytics, which is acronyms go. CARTA is a very cool one. Her background is available on the website. What I want to draw your attention to is that as a scholar, she has been extraordinarily productive, has a number of books as author and editor, several hundred papers and presentations in refereed journals, and is utterly prolific in bringing in external funding. She is a fellow of the IBM Center for Advanced Studies, a dear colleague, and with that, I'm going to hand it over and pass the baton to Dr. Yesha. Thank you very much for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to be here and share with you my thoughts about data science in general. So I'll organize my presentation today in kind of 3 parts. First of all, I'll share with you definition of data science and the current state of affairs in the field of data science. And then we'll move on and talk about exciting innovative projects that are going actually nowadays at IDISK that involve analytics, data science, and blockchain technology. And then since it's a Meet a Data Scientist lecture series, I'll talk a little bit about my personal journey, how actually I got to be where I am and how I picked up the field of data science many, many years ago before it became and gained as much prominence that we have it now in the field. So also what I want to share with you now is my ideas about data science, because people have different perceptions of data science. That's why I have a kind of a provocative title. I'm talking about the paradigm of actionable knowledge, because in my mind, data science is not about the big data and managing of the big data. It's actually extracting the actionable knowledge from the vast amount of information. So as we all know, when the internet became reality, we have a lot of things happening in the internet in 1 minute, in 1 second, and more information are coming to fruition there. And then the concept of the big data kind of became even more prominent in 2014 and 2015, not because one of a sudden we got more data, it's because the social media data became a reality. So it's due to social media, really, we started to have this overflow of the information. So we have this staggering flow of the information, and in 2014, 2015, big data became almost a field. And I was sharing with some of my colleagues the story that at that time I was running a different NSF center called Center for Hybrid Multi-Core Productivity. And then NSF elite asked me to set up another center in the big data, and I refused. And that's when CARTA was born, because I said, it's not about big data. It's about actionable data, about actionable knowledge, and about the ability to extract the information from the data. And the idea to do it real time, because there are many studies that you can find in Deloitte, IBM, and Accenture that tells us that if you don't really work on the data after the first 3 minutes, the way it's ingested into the system, it's basically lost. Then instead of having actionable data from which you can get knowledge, you actually create what you call symmetry of data, because once you have it, store it, and don't use it, and process it in the next few minutes of its origination, then the value of this data is not really big, but you're still stuck with the maintenance, storage, and other good things that come with the curation of the data in the system. So since we have so much data, the natural question is how much of this data is actually relevant, and how much of this is knowledge, and how much of this is data that may or may not be used in the century. In my career, and later I'll talk a little bit about myself towards the end, I had the privilege to run and manage one of the largest actually unclassified archive in the world at NASA Goddard. It was Center of Excellence, Space Data Information Sciences. Just to give you an idea, 25 years ago, we were doing petabytes of data, and now they're talking about exabytes and zettabytes, so many different things. And what I discovered there as a part of my experience that, and we were serving at that time 1,500 astrophysicists around the world in terms of actually serving them the data from NASA. What we've discovered that 90% of NASA data, the space images, were never used or used maybe every 20 years. So it's 10% of the data that really contained the knowledge, the information that were used by astrophysicists to do the job. And this made me start thinking, how do we deal with this amount of the information? How do we curate it? How do we clean the data? And even though, you know, we need to keep all these NASA images in this example, but there are medical images and others that we'll be talking today about, how do we keep it in a way that they are there in case we need them, but knowing that we'll need them at a very small percentage of the time. We really want to organize our data and mine it in a way that we'll have a real-time access to the knowledge or metadata, if you will, that is extracted from this information. And all of this boils down to the way our human brain actually works, which is yet another project that we started in IDISK and CARTA that we'll be discussing also later today, that takes advantage of this novel technology. So from the kind of human sensory system, the sensory system sends about 11 million bits of information per second. But then there is a big disconnect about how much we can actually digest or register. So from these 11 million bits, 15 or 20 bits can be actually digested per second. It just gives you the idea that we have a limited capacity to absorb and process information with our brain, right? So therefore, we have some survival instincts, we have certain things that nature gave us, but again, we cannot really process the amount of information that is coming our way. So obviously, everybody heard the term information overload, so I'm not to preach about that. I just want to basically to get across the idea that the ultimate goal of big data technology is developing these filters that will aid in critical decision making, meaning that we need these 15, 20 bits that we can process with the right type of 15, 20 bits that can actually enable us to make the proper decision. So this is not just a random kind of selection or even some sort of educated guessing. We want to play with our probabilities in a way that we are with certain confidence intervals are certain that the data or information we are extracting from this vast amount of data is actionable and actually assist us in the right decision-making process. And this is specifically important when we deal with industrial Internet of Things decision, when we deal with medical devices. As you all know, digital therapeutics now became a reality, and we had lots of discussion with Nick and our medical colleagues. How do we make it reality, and how do we actually assist the doctors? We're not replacing the doctors with software and decision-making processes, which is basically a life-depending procedures that would rely on artificial intelligence, on things that are coming from the data science domain, and how we can assure that our patients don't die, but also the decisions are adequate and we preserve all the privacy and other things that we would like to have in this type of environment. So what is happening in a typical kind of AI, machine learning applications? So in general, we process the data, and the amount of data gained for the most part is big, but it can be small as well. And sometimes there are big kind of discussions about how much data you really need to make a decision. So while the vast of the majority of the problems have overload of information, in certain cases, we don't have enough statistically meaningful sample spaces to actually run our machine learning algorithms, to do the learning, to do certain things, or perhaps we don't want to process such a big amount of data because we may not have compute power, or maybe this compute power, if we have it, will take longer than we want in case we need to have a real-time decision. So initially, when we collect the data, whether small or big or medium size, what is happening? We do data pre-processing. Sometimes I call it data janitorial services, right? We collect the data, we do data integration, then we normalize the data, we do certain feature selections, we do some dimension reduction, and then we basically stage the data for data mining, or what I usually call pattern discovery or processing, right? So we are looking for certain patterns. Sometimes we are looking for certain specific things if we have a hypothesis, so we know what we are looking for. Then we are kind of finding, if you will, a right hammer to kill a fly or to kill an elephant, depending what kind of problem we are trying to solve. Or perhaps we are looking for a needle in a haystack, and this usually happens in cybersecurity problems. Or let's say when we are looking for drug repurposing, or we are looking for certain solutions when we are not sure what the conjecture is, we're looking for certain correlations. So this is where the data mining tools or semi-supervised learning tools play significant role, because we are able actually to solve specific problem if we know what we're looking for, or start to look at correlations and start to learn more. And by learning more and getting more data, perhaps solving certain problems that were not even posed, right? And then, of course, once we have all these exercises done, hopefully successfully, we have post-processing that leads to what is known as pattern information knowledge, right? So we do evaluation, we try to understand what did we find. We want maybe to select certain patterns that we would like to explore more, or perhaps we want to visualize our results. And this is where there is a complete cycle between different type of expertise that we'll be also discussing today that are needed in order to provide solutions to data science problem, because data scientist is not a unique individual that can solve and work on the problem of national significance and actually be able to address everything we need. It's a very much interdisciplinary field that requires number of expertise, but it's what is important that is that the good data scientist would be able to understand the problem and parse it and bring the specific expertise to the table. So we'll be able to actually to solve this problem in a timely fashion and also get inadequate results. We do a lot of work in the medical domain. We work in the CARTA, the centers that I'm heading. We have 5 sites. One of them is newly created site at the University of Miami, but we also have Tel Aviv University, Rutgers, North Carolina State, and University of Maryland, of course, at this point. So we do a lot of work in the medical domain, medical imaging. So when you try to analyze the type of tools that primarily involved so far in medical field, and I'll show you some example again later in my talk, we pretty much using machine learning as the main tool, if you will, to assess and solve the problem. And we're using some of the statistical tools. Then a lot of work is done in the pre-processing. Cleaning the data is, I would say, 60 or 70% of the effort. And if you look at the commercial companies, there are even companies that are making significant revenues out of simply cleaning the data. What again, I call data janitorial services. They're not very exciting services, but they're very unique, very labor consuming, and require certain unique expertise, and they're needed, because if you don't clean the data properly and you don't make mistakes on the way, or you do make mistakes on the way rather, then you really have a problem in the actual analysis in the results that you'll be getting them. Now, if you deal with imagery, you'll do a lot of classification, clustering, and then of course we'll need to do post-processing for presentation. Okay, so the data science field is not really new. I did my PhD in distributed databases. It will date me, and I'll share with you, about 30 years ago. And this was the beginning of distributed databases. So now people saying there is demise of databases and we are more kind of into data lakes, but it's still very distributed. And at that time, we already had kind of the beginning of doing some sort of analysis in distributed fashion, which is now has a fancier name. federated learning and ensemble learning and many other cool things that are happening. So now we are entering, and I would say solidifying the role of data science as data science, I would say version 2.0. So as data science again evolved more as a mature discipline in around 2016, 2017, we are entering the next generation of data science where certain specific tools and problems are solved. And people are looking at kind of synthesis of actionable knowledge from the raw data through complete data lifecycle process. So again, we ingest raw data, and nowadays you have companies like Seagate, and we have a number of patents with them through our center where we do processing of the data as we actually ingest the data into the machines. It's a very exciting kind of situation. So the idea is, how do you grab the raw data, process it very fast so you can have actually extract the knowledge, extract the actionable data, and go from there. Now, when people talk about data science, and depending whom you talk, Department of Mathematics will also, especially applied mathematics, always tell me, Yelena, it's not about computer science, it's about us statisticians, right? Or us mathematicians. The computer scientists saying it's our field, right? And then you have data mining people that work sometimes in business schools and say, no, it's all about business applications, and we do that. And then, of course, you have people who do creative computing and visualization. They're saying, no, it's all about us. But then you have infrastructure people that've been there all along, and they're supporting all of this, right? And they're saying, no, it's all about software and network engineering and subject matter expertise. So what is it's all really about? And in my opinion, it's nicely depicted in this Venn diagram. It's all of the above, okay? So depending on the problem you're trying to solve, you really need this inter-multidisciplinary approach, and you need really a right team. And that's why our institute is already so successful and is poised to be one of the national leaders in this field, because we are able to bring a team expertise from different domains that work together on a large problems that have human significance, if you will, human values, from the medical field to data field, to actually homeland security values and things of that nature. So it's not just about a specific field, it's really about the team. So the problem that requires a data science solution, in my mind, very rarely can be solved with a single individual or two. It does require a team. It doesn't have to be 100 people team, but it needs to be a very cohesive team of at least 15 experts that really work together and is able to solve specific application problem. Okay, so if you're trying to take more academic approach and saying, okay, so what do we need? What do we teach? And this is kind of coming to more of me speaking, not so much as innovator and person who likes to build the products, but somebody who would educate the American workforce of tomorrow. So what kind of skills we would like to engrave into our next generation students that would come with either major in data science or minor in data science or some specialization in data science. I personally believe that the approach we should take to data science, that everyone who graduates with university degree should have a course in data science. Now, these courses should be taught in a different fashion. If you're a history major or you are an art major, you should be taking a data science class. We are living in a digital age, and we need to train two types of individuals. Individuals who are I-shaped people who are deep, and these are computer science kind of degrees, computer engineering types of degrees in data science. And people who are more T-shaped, that are having other specialization like biology, medicine, and things of that nature, but they have enough depth and understanding how to use at least the data science tools so they can really solve domain-specific problems where they are working in. So in order to build and train the right type of individuals, what do we need? We need to teach them data analytics and visualization. We need to be able to clean the data, which usually comes more kind of from the data background, from databases, classes, and things of that sort. We need to be able to quantify and digest and understand what does it mean to have an actionable data. Then we need to have a mining knowledge, meaning transforming knowledge into conclusions to certain specific results, if you will. So once we extract the knowledge from the data, and believe it or not, it was 27 years ago, almost to the date, when I started ACM conference on information and knowledge management, CAKM. I was a young assistant professor, and people were saying, "You're crazy, Yelena, starting a new conference," especially at that time, databases were still very solid field. And I said, no, it's changing. And this when I started, now it became the premier conference in the world. And I must confess that sometimes I get my papers rejected from this conference. But just to give you an idea that this whole concept of knowledge extraction from the information is not new, but it took a long time really to go through iteration. And for us as scientists, being able to digest and corner in the more applied fields, what exactly we mean by extracting an actionable knowledge from the vast amount of information, okay? Now, infrastructure is important. As I said, this is part of the things that we are doing, and we are fortunate at IDISK to have a very solid computing piece. And that's why I called my center NSF Center CARTA, and accelerated there stands for high performance computing, quantum computing, neuromorphic computing. So all this infrastructure is a must. If we don't have the proper infrastructure and we don't have the layers built on the proper infrastructure, and we don't architect our system in the fashion that they need to be architected, or re-architected, if you will, to solve specific problems, then of course we are out of luck in terms of finding the proper type of solution. We also need to work on long-term archival storage. When I work at NASA, we work on holographic storages. We even created holographic storages and sent them to space, because they said, okay, the storage industry is changing so fast, and if we collect information in space and then we don't have a stable storage there, how do we copy it almost real time from one place to another? So we'll be able to keep the information alive over a significant part of our lifespan, or at least the life cycle of the need of this data. Okay. Now, data curation is another big area for data science, because once we collected the raw data, we process it, we feel comfortable. How do we curate it? How do we store it? And how do we make sure that we can reuse it, repurpose? And how do we legitimize the data? And how do we keep a secure access to the data or the metadata that was already created from the existing data? So in terms of definition, I promise you to talk a little bit about the paradigm. And again, this is just my personal view that I kind of confluence on or basically came to over the years and years working with a large amount of data. So what is the data science paradigm? In my opinion, it's an extraction of actionable knowledge directly from the data through a process of discovery, hypothesis, and hypothesis testing. Okay, so as you see from this definition, in order to go through this life cycle of dealing and massaging the data, you really need to have specific expertise that doesn't come from the single field of computer science. You obviously need statistics, and you need many other interesting expertise in order to be able to take care of this type of situation. And the data life cycle is the set of processes that transform raw data into the actionable knowledge, okay? And we are after actionable knowledge. So what we want to extract what we need from the data and get an action on this. An action can be publication, can be certain picture visualization, can be a signal, emergency signal, alert system if it's a medical system, or it can be an input to another device, which will be driven by the input that comes from the previous devices, if you really have Internet of Things and they're interrelated in terms of passing the information and knowledge around. So analytics in this type of settings can be defined as the synthesis of knowledge from the information. And with new big data paradigm, analytics are no longer separable from the data model and the distribution of the data across horizontally scaled resources. Right, so scalability is a big issue. That's why we are fortunate to have Triton here. We are fortunate to understand how to deal with large amount of information, how to scale the computation to address different type of problems. And this is extremely important. And, but for us, the people who provide also the infrastructure, we need to work with application people really to grasp the models and exactly what they're trying to achieve while solving their problems, that will give our computational scientists an ability to actually solve this problem with a high speed and high fidelity. So what is needed in a data science? So data science is probably one of the best, if not the best profession nowadays. If you Google Money Magazine, what is the best profession, and data science come either number 1 or 2. However, if you try to dissect the job offerings, and I have a lot of, almost every day, you know, I have at least 5 or 6 calls, people looking for the top students, and people are trying to hire. Even now in the COVID era, there's still tremendous demand for people in data science. So who are these data scientists and what are the specifications? So in general, in my opinion, skills and expertise matter more than titles. However, you know, in our kind of structured society, every advertisement comes with a job title, right? So, and very few of them actually say data scientist. They'll say database administrator. They'll say data engineer. They'll say data analyst, data architect, business analyst, right? Data and analytics manager. So in reality, it doesn't really matter, because if you have a well-trained person, he or she can fill most of this position. However, if you are more business oriented and looking more at the ability to optimize the enterprises, to do marketing, and we had, I remember, a very great talk by some VP who, I think Nick invited him, who does marketing for yogurt. So this is one of those things. So marketing is 20% of the cost of every product. So if you really process the data right, you have a right business model, right business analyst, then of course the sky is the limit. Then you have people who are more data engineers, then and they are looking more at putting the systems together. You have architects that are looking at the back end, then you have analysts who are more at front end and trying to work with the main specialists, and then you have managers that actually manage the group of people. Now, the interesting thing is that nowadays, if you look at, again, at the skill set and how do we train our next generation of workforce, for better or for worse, there is opportunity for different type of training. It's almost, I can say with certainty that we can take high school graduates and in 6 months train them so they'll be able to enter a data science world, if you will, and find themselves a place. They'll be intelligent users and maybe entry-level people, all the way up to the people who are very senior and have PhDs and maybe gazillions of publications in work in data science. So there is a whole spectrum of expertise that are needed now in the market. Now, what really is more marketable nowadays, from what I see, is again people somewhere mid-level career people that combine not just the technical expertise, but have certain advantage. They understand certain fields, as I said, biology, business, medicine. They don't have to have a formal training, but at least they understand the terminologies, understand the science if they go into scientific application. They understand the business modeling and marketing if they go into the business world. And they understand finances if they go into the banking industry. So this is where I think we really need to concentrate on, and this is probably where the skills of somebody with a master's program that Professor Agihara with Dr. Manina are developing would play into the picture. So it's almost like there is tremendous need, in my opinion, for people with advanced degrees, but not necessarily PhDs. They're not necessarily researchers, but they're people who are beyond their basic kind of bachelor's degree, but not necessarily would like to do innovation or do the classical academic work in data studies. So for those of you on the call today who are inspired by data science and would like to wander in those fields and either do a formal degree or do some vocational training or do certification. So why to study data science? And different people have different aspiration or different motivation why they go and study the field of data science. Some of them like to identify certain patterns. They're fascinated by certain problems. And I'll be sharing with you later in today's presentation my journey, how I came to data science. This was inspired more by medical field, actually, rather than anything else. But some people like to look at biological patterns, at chemical patterns, at anything else. Some people like to quantify what they know and go more on the statistical sides. Now, what motivates this individual that goes into this field? Some really like very high salaries that this profession really comes with in terms of compensation. Almost, I would say 150% employment if such thing exists. There are usually, I would say nowadays, 4 to 5 jobs per graduate in data science. So it's really tremendous opportunity for somebody young who is entering this field and have the talent and ambition to pursue careers in these things. The promotions are relatively fast because the field is new. Some people like to help individuals, right? Because you can work with socioeconomic models, you can try to work on the inequality that exists in the society. So I have a lot of data scientists that are working for labor department, working with USA, trying to help underrepresented communities, countries, and things of other nature. And some like to gain novel data or access to novel data. These are people who work for NASA or some exploratory agencies that basically have expertise that enable them to come to situations where they work with this enormous amount of data that is novel in nature, and they'll get an access to this through the employment. So if you look at the value and kind of difficulty, this is kind of a curve, and I like to do curves, as you can imagine. I'm a mathematician by training and computer scientist as well, primarily computer scientist, but I do have dual first degree. So I like to see the graphs and I like numbers. So first of all, you have descriptive analytics that basically tell you what happened. Then you have diagnostic analytics. Why did it happen? Then you have predictive analytics that do anticipation, what will happen. And then you have prescriptive analytics. How can we make it happen? So in a sense, once we learn what's going on, what we can change and how we can optimize the situation. And the higher the ladder you go, the level, of course, of difficulty is growing. So, and this kind of usually goes proportionally to the skill set that individuals are gaining while training for this type of profession. So when I started my lecture today, I mentioned that large-scale use cases, or sometimes I like to call them problem of national significance or problem of extreme interest, usually comes with the access to the big data sets. Not always, but most likely they will require access to the big data set, but also processing of this big data set. So the example of such activities would be your traditional Google search engine, which is huge in terms of the data it processes and crunches every day. Then recommendation from Amazon and Netflix. Financial institutions have tremendous amount of data, require tremendous number of resources, specifically as it applies to the fraud detections. Now, logistic industry is like DHL, UPS, or fleet of management is another interesting large-scale problem. And nowadays, I'll talk about it again later when I talk about specific projects. I'll talk about supply chain of PPE as it kind of relates to the current pandemic crisis. So how do you optimize supply chain using this novel data science technology that would enable us not just to secure our supply chain of vaccines or PPE, but also make sure that logistics is properly done. So we actually get the delivery of vaccine to different states properly with the right amount, with the right refrigerations, and with all the constraints that usually the medical community and at the same time our OMB, Office of Management and Budget, imposes on this, because we're solving a number of optimization problems here It's first of all the budget, then the availability of the vaccine, acquisition of the vaccine, and then of course distribution. So all these cycles needs to be interconnected, and then we need to secure and optimize the supply chain. So finally the vaccine will reach the hands of individuals on time before crisis get even as a bigger toll on the lives of our people. And the other big area is healthcare records from patients. So this is a huge undertaking, huge amount of data, but also it's not even so much huge in terms of the data, but huge in terms of protecting it and being able to interoperate it and actually make sense of it in terms of trying to build the decision support system based on the information that we have. Now, since we are dealing with the data, and most of the data, the big data, is used to produce certain scientific discoveries or results or scientific products, artifacts, whatever you want to call them, we need to build infrastructure that enable us to have reproducibility, right? Because those of you who working in exact sciences or have a connection to exact scientists know that it's very important to be able to reproduce results. And also to have certain degree of portability, meaning that if we have the algorithms, we have certain solution to specific scientific or analytics problem, we should be able to reproduce them, but pour them to another different infrastructure, to different operating system, to different computers, right? Because as the hardware and infrastructure evolves and becomes more exciting, more mature, we don't want necessarily to rewrite our algorithms that we've developed, let's say on Triton, and let's say I'm sure that Nick and Joel will be looking to upgrade Triton in the next few years to even more exciting machine. But then everything we've developed on Triton shouldn't go to waste, and we should not need to reprogram everything, right? So all these things need to be designed in a way that we should be able to adapt our solutions to different type of computational and storage infrastructure that is basically invaluable in terms of supporting different type of application. Now, before I come to the specific projects that are going on now in IDISK, I want to give you yet another interesting example because in the centers that I'm running, we have a lot of work in computer vision and also in self-driverless cars and also computer vision for medical domains. So we are doing a lot of work in classification and label predictions. We are working on different models that are built on training examples or training sets where we are using semi-supervised or supervised learning kind of tools. We are looking at the analytics that predict unknown class labels. Again, in terms of technology, a lot of work in deep learning, neural networks, rule-based classification, pattern-based classification, logistic regression. So these are the tools that are deployed with different teams at CARTA that are very effective in medical imaging domain, but also in driverless cars and many other places where computer vision now, taking the leading role in terms of, leading the way in solving large-scale problems. Typical application we are working with a lot with actually CMS and Northrop Grumman on fraud detection. Northrop Grumman is a lead agency that works with Center of Medicaid and Medicare for fraud detection. Now again, they're looking at ICD-10 kind of data. They're not looking at individual doctor kind of fraud. They're looking at organized networks, and we're helping them to do that. Then we're looking at classifying diseases, web pages, direct marketing. I personally have done tremendous amount of work in electronic commerce for the government agency and also for private industry. Also, we've done a lot of work with location-based commerce and many other things as it's related to the actual electronic commerce. And now we are moving more and more to remote work. So this is the next thing. So 25 years ago, I wandered in electronic commerce and they said, Yelena, what? And I said, yes, but it took 25 years. Now I'm saying it's remote work and blockchains. I believe blockchains and remote work is the next thing that is going really to boom in the next, I would say, 5 years. In fact, I predict that 10%, at least 10% of all the global economy would be powered by the blockchain solution. And it's not the same blockchain as you usually think when you think about Bitcoin. It's a similar technology that is used to produce cryptocurrency, but the type of blockchains we are working on are permission-based, and we are having a number of extremely exciting results in this area that are published, just got accepted, I think 2 months ago, to the top cybersecurity conference. And just now, before I came to this lecture, I was presenting with my colleague at the large cybersecurity conference, about 1,500 people at NIST on Zero Trust, where we actually have cooperative research agreement with Department of Homeland Security and National Institute of Standards and Technology. We are optimizing the purchases of software licenses for the government. It looks like the government is wasting hundreds of millions of dollars because they are over purchasing software licenses. And by using the blockchain technology, you can automate the process and actually minimize the waste in the government. It's obviously not done on purpose, but because technology is not fully implemented in the government, different government agencies, and there are 15 of them, are buying the same license and simply are not using them properly or to the full extent for what they're paying. So continue kind of this technology. We are also looking at the trend and time series, deviation analysis, sequential pattern mining, periodicity analysis, and you name it. And this is more come from the field of industrial engineering and statistics, but there are a number of techniques that are extremely useful here. And now I come to probably one of the most exciting part of this lecture. I want to talk about what we're actually doing at IDISK. I'm relatively new to IDISK, as you know. I joined about a year ago, but it feels like I'm here already a decade, because I got to know so many exciting and phenomenal people. And we started a number of very, very interesting projects here. So we're doing a lot of work in medical imaging, where we are using machine learning, statistics, computer vision, and working with subject matter experts. So we have a visiting fellow in IDISK, Professor Morris, who is also have appointment in radiology. We are working with radiology departments in Maryland, starting to work with Miami, and also working with University of California, San Francisco School of Radiology. So we built what we called artificial intelligent virtual radiology assistant that is basically AI-based program that enable to diagnose lung cancer images. Now, for those that don't know, and some of you may not even want to know, but 32% of all radiology reports are read incorrectly. And this is a known statistics. I didn't make it up. It was done in literature. So what we are doing, we are not trying to replace radiologists, but we are trying to build the AI-based tools that are assisting radiologists to do the proper diagnosis. And now we are working with FDA actually to see if these tools can be adopted as a part of digital solutions for this type of environment. We are also working with RAD8 Lab, which is a non-profit institute that composes of 83 countries, where they're trying to bring radiology into underrepresented countries, because the machines by themselves are not expensive. So what is expensive is actually the time of radiologists. So if we get some sort of green light and validation of what we have, we can share this at no cost as a basically philanthropy and charity with the countries that don't have an access to this technology to diagnose lung cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, and you name it. Then we are also working with the quality assessment of clinical CT exams, trying to understand if they are really up to the par and how to eliminate the errors in this type of activities. So building on our kind of decadal work on AI for radiology, we've been fortunate to secure a National Science Foundation award that's called RAPID, that came when the pandemic came in February, March. National Science Foundation contacted me, because they usually contact all the national centers and say, Yelena, we need some new technology, we need help to fight the pandemic. And at that time, if you remember, we had big difficulty to actually have correct tests, and we didn't have the quantity of the COVID tests, but we also, some of them were false negative or false positives, and we couldn't really calibrate our testing system properly. So very fast, we came up with the concept of actually using CT scans and use the computer programs that using the CT scans, we can diagnose corona 100% of the time. Initially, what I heard from my emergency medicine doctors and my radiologists, that many people got misdiagnosed, and people with viral pneumonia actually were not treated properly because they saw that they have corona, or they got positive, false positive test for corona. And some of them actually unfortunately died because they didn't get the right treatment, because apparently the treatment from corona is different than the treatment for viral pneumonia. So anyway, I'm happy to report that we got 1,500 images actually from all the places you wouldn't believe it. We actually got it from Iran, 1,500 COVID patient images. We trained our algorithms, and our paper was just presented at the top computer conference, IEEE Big Data Conference in December, of course, over Zoom, but this is the leading conference in data science, big data, where we actually were able to share the results, and we still continue to refine them and move to the next level. We are working with a number of different agencies. It started with actually IBM, DHS, and NSF on social media sentiment analysis. So we are using certain learning tools for sentiment analysis, and more recently, and I'm working closely with Nick, we will be submitting proposal to FDA. They want us to use social media analysis to understand the noises or the adverse effect of implantable devices. Because what turns out is, and we did the studies for pharmacovigilance for the actual medicine, in medical device market, the final clinical trials phases are already when the device is implanted in the human body, and the device manufacturers need to report what happened to the device until the actual approval come into the picture. However, it's not always possible for FDA to see what is happening. And not always even device manufacturer know about certain adverse effects that can happen with this specific device. But patients are sharing their information online. They're sharing it in their portals, or they're sharing it with other members of the community. So we will be developing crawlers that will look at the signals of adverse effects of the medical devices. We have tremendous amount of work and research on blockchains as they apply for securing medical devices. We've developed a novel system for FDA MD-EpiNet that enable patient consent. Then we are also using blockchain for supply distribution. And the other interesting area where blockchain are used, and we are doing some research there, is curtailing the fake news. So we are waiting now for funding from the Institute for Speech Freedom in Iran, from all the places, that is funded by the State Department, where we'll be using blockchain and AI algorithms to see what kind of misinformation people in Iran are getting from their government or other sources. We're doing a lot of work with NOAA and NASA. So there we are actually trying TensorFlow on quantum machines. We have access to 3 different quantum machines. So we are running TensorFlow algorithms and applying them to some NASA problems. With NOAA, we are working on their operational models for weather prediction and trying to optimize them on their supercomputer. So this is a very exciting project that's going there. And finally, I come to the last part of my lecture, which is my personal journey. And it will probably take a long time to describe how really I came to this field. And computer science was by no means my first choice. So therefore, those of you who really want to know more about me, Forbes magazine about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit less, wrote 2 articles about my life and how I got where I'm now. So it really describes my personal journey. But in a nutshell, I was born in former Soviet Union, which is now in a country that is now called Ukraine. From what I learned from my parents at the age of 1.5 and 2, I discovered the concept of even and odd numbers. When I was 2.5, the concept of zero really excited me. And very early in the game, I knew I'll do something with numbers. I didn't have a clue what it will be. And then by the time I went to the high school, I was very much fascinated with physics and wanted to do actually probably PhD in physics. I was second in Ukraine in high school Olympics, which is big because if you can imagine, it's about country of 60 million. Now, however, for national competitions, they didn't send me because I was a girl and they said it's physics, maybe you'll have to assemble some circuits and, so even though it was at that time Communist Party, they still kind of didn't believe that women can do physics. And then at that time, something came to my head and I learned about computers, although I didn't know much. And I said, I want to do computer-based diagnosis. And this is what I'm going to do in life. But then when I was 17, we were refugees. We left former Soviet Union, which was lucky for us. And we ended up in Italy. It was me, my parents who didn't speak any English, and 2 of my grandmothers and $500. We became stateless. I had USSR exit visa not valid for return, visa citizenship stateless. And we spent 8 months in Italy waiting for the visa. When we came to Canada, at that time I could actually read and write English. I kind of self-taught and took lessons. But when I put the TV, what I studied, I guess, back in Ukraine was British English. I couldn't understand so much. I could write and read, but anyway, I went to University of Toronto by foot when we were still staying in this refugee hotel, which was a filthy place, but it doesn't matter. They were nice. They took us. And people were very nice. They looked at my record. They said, you're amazing, but you know what you need for computer-based diagnosis, you need PhD in engineering and MD. And by the way, young lady, in North America, education costs money. And then I look at my mother and I realized that I have a problem. So, and then I was walking back because 50 cents on the bus was too much to the hotel from the University of Toronto. And then talking to my mother, I was very much depressed and didn't know what to do. And somebody overheard us and speaking Russian actually. And he said, I'm sorry, but the young lady, it sounds like you're very ambitious. Let me give you an advice. Study the shallow science, computer science, and you'll always have a job. And I said, okay. And he said, later you can do whatever you want. So I went to university, I took my way in, I missed all the deadlines, I took local tests. So I made myself in, I took computer science class and I didn't like it. I dropped my first computer science class. And I took physics and mathematics and I loved it and I didn't know what to do. Then I started to do pre-med. And then I took computer science class again. And then of course I got the open scholarship and my parents still didn't have a job. So I convinced the university that I can use my room and board money and live at home so I could pay rent for my parents. And so in 2.5 years, I finished a degree in computer science and mathematics. And then the rest is history. And it wasn't until 2003 when I was already a full professor at the age of 32 and finished running as a director of a large NASA scientific center that at that time he was the chair of the surgery, walked into my office, uninvited, I didn't know who he is. And he said, Yelena, I need somebody like you. I'm building the operation room of the future in the medical school. And I heard about you. You have to come and help me. And this is when it was the beginning of realizing my dream. And this is when I got an appointment in medical school and I started to do things that I was dreaming. So it was not a direct journey, although I was doing data science without knowing the name of data science. We call it distributed databases all along. I walk into situations where I started to work on medical applications and many other applications. So anyway, so that was my journey. It was very exciting, and I've done a lot of interesting things in my life, and I believe we'll do even more exciting things and make a quantum jump to the next level at IDISK. with what we have here and what we are inspired to build. So with that, I stop and entertain a few questions if you have any.
Спасибо, гражданка.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. One of the things, especially about you sharing your journey, makes it clear to us that one of IDISK's missions is to provide more opportunities so that other women do not have to have the hurdles you did. That the number of women who are going to be able to shape the future of data science, we need to make sure that their path is different and perhaps easier than yours. We have just a few minutes rather, for questions. I don't see one yet, but you'll forgive me for asking a sort of a meta-scientific question, because you made a number of observations that I think are really important for scientific process, and for that matter, epistemology. If you're talking about knowledge, you're talking about how we use data to learn and to know. But you also made reference to reproducibility, which is a great challenge right now in many of the sciences. You've emphasized biomedical sciences, but in fact, it's a problem everywhere. Say just a little bit, if you would please, about data science and reproducibility.
Well, actually, I have two PhDs that did their doctorate in scientific reproducibility. One of them is now distinguished information scientist at NASA. So scientific reproducibility is a problem in any field. In fact, the statistic is horrible. It's 30% of all scientific results that are reported in research literature cannot be reproduced, right? So, and I'm not claiming that our colleagues in different fields are actually trying to produce some fraudulent results. Maybe few are, but most of them are not. And the reason we can't reproduce them comes from different type of problems. Maybe, as I said, the algorithms can be ported to the different machines, or the data is not available, and things of that sort. So one way to actually capture scientific reproducibility is by using actually the blockchains. And this is the technology that I'm very fond of, and I believe is the future or part of the future of evolution of the data science, that would enable us actually to do democratization of the data on one hand, because this is what we want. We want to share the data as much as possible, but we also will have a knowledge and ability to capture every step of the way using the distributed ledgers and reproduce the data, or reverse engineer the steps how the data was produced, if you will. So this would enable us to have 100% reproducibility in the field. And without reproducibility in scientific community, I don't think we can really advance the science, because certain results are fundamental and new in nature, and there are very few of them, but many results are actually incremental, as we all know. So we build on our colleagues' work. And if we cannot reproduce their work, what are the chances we can really advance the state of the science without being able to reproduce what has been done already in science? So it's a huge impediment, and I believe we have a scientific solution for it.
A data science scientific solution, exactly. Thank you for that.
Right. We have a data science solution, exactly. That's a good point. Yeah. Absolutely.
So in 11th hour, we're getting a couple of questions. I think, just a quick shout out to Eve and Helen, Professors Cairo, Semiramis, Kurtman, Norris, in addition to Michael, and I have a privilege of working with IDISK. But Alberto has asked, you mentioned Forbes published 2 articles to a book. What a long, fascinating journey. It's more of an observation. Daniel, I'm wondering, Daniel, if you're related to Esther. How should graduate students aspiring to work in multidisciplinary data science, but only having generalized degrees, go about furthering their careers?
As I mentioned, the data science have the whole spectrum of expertise and requirements. So if certain individual come from, let's say, a traditional, I don't know, economics degree or social science degree, there is place for such a person to either gain a professional master's degree, which I advocate, that would not require the kind of traditional data science or computer science training, or perhaps one thing that we should entertain at UMiami and what is happening in other universities is to having combined degrees, like minors in data science. And let's say if you, for example, I'm not picking on social sciences, but let's say if you do take social science degree or sociology degree, which is a good degree actually for data science, because if you do kind of geopolitical or sociological kind of research, then the type of data science that you need to learn is more about being an intelligent user of the tools. So this is what I want to get everybody to understand after my lecture. Not everybody should really understand and being able to develop new AI algorithms. It's enough for 80% of data scientists to be an intelligent user of the technology and understand which algorithm exists that can be applicable and how to apply it properly. And this also goes for our solid sciences, for medical school, for weather prediction models. We don't need people who are predicting our weather to be AI kind of gurus and develop new algorithms. They need to know what is the state of the art, and they should be able to apply these models properly to their specific domain. And this is not easy at all. Even just that is by itself is a huge challenge, but there is no need. It would be nice, but there is no need for individual with some other degree really to go and become, as I said, computer scientist or AI expert. You need to understand enough to be able to be an intelligent user.
And on that note, that's kind of a concluding remark that makes it clear that IDISK is trying to become a kind of a universal donor to foster that, both at our institution and in our community. Professor Dr. Yesha, thank you so very much for this. Michael, do you have any final remarks, or Nick, perhaps?
No, thank you very much, Dr. Yesha, Dr. Goodman, and everyone at IDISK. Stay tuned, everybody, for our next lineup of wonderful Meet a Data Scientist speakers on our website. We'll get those announced very shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. See you soon, guys. Bye.
Hi, Dr. Yesha. Thank you so much. Great talk.
Thank you. Pleasure.